Okay, now we've pretty much got the whole horizontal parts of the fuselage put together. For now, we can set this aside. The next thing we're going to do is work on the vertical parts of the fuselage. First thing, we need to attach the doublers to the forward portion of the lower fuselage. You can see they line up together there. I will use 3M77, and rather than spraying on here and getting overspray behind where I need this piece, what I'll do is I'll spray and soak this down real good so it's got a real wet coat of 3M77 on it, and then right away I'll place that down on there, press it down real good, and then that does a good job of transferring 3M77 from the doubler onto the main lower fuselage piece. You'll peel it back off, let that tack up real good, and then carefully place that back down into place, and it'll stay stuck. And so you'll do that to both the left and right hand doublers to keep those in place using that 3M77. You could use welders, but you'll probably use quite a bit of it to try to get that stuck. I guess you could probably use a polyurethane glue. You just have to be careful with the foaming and maybe weight it down so that it doesn't try to spread the pieces apart when it foams up. So we've got the lower fuselage doublers put on there. Now we can go ahead and attach them to the horizontal pieces themselves. I'll reattach my aileron. And the horizontal piece itself, again, just use some welders. You'll apply it to this lower fuselage piece. A couple of marks along here, along the center line, will give you something to line up to. Put your welders on there, and then just press it in place. The fuselage does have the cutout to match the contour of the wing, and so you just line up the leading edge, press it in place. It's not completely flat, so it'll want to kind of rock a little bit, but what you can do is once you kind of get it stuck, it'll tend to stay in place. In this case, I'll just take the vertical, because it's about the difference in the thickness of foam, and I can press that down there, and then once that's stuck, I can move it back to the back and use it to kind of press that down and put it in place. You'll want to check everything to make sure everything lines up. You've got a cutout for the elevator in the back, make sure that clears and everything, but per cut, as far as what comes in my kit, everything should line up well. And I'll go ahead and temporarily attach that in place. Okay, now at this point I've got the lower fuselage attached to all the horizontal pieces, and everything's glued up. Rather than continuing on with putting the top of the fuselage on, at this point is usually where I'll go in and start placing servos and getting all that stuff put on the airplane itself. Everything's pretty rigid, pretty close to where it needs to be. If you want to, balance-wise, you can go ahead and temporarily attach, a little bit of hot glue or something, put the upper fuselage on, and just tape your rudder on. As far as trying to get the components in the right place, you can kind of go off of what you've seen as far as the pictures of my airplane. Eventually, if I can get plans together, I'll do that, which will show some measurements. If you have specific questions, just post on the groups and I can take measurements and put those on there. Now we've got the horizontal fuselage all assembled. We've got the lower fuselage attached to that. I'm going to take my vertical fuselage and lay it underneath the horizontal fuselage piece from about where the wing stops and the aft horizontal fuselage piece starts. And that's going to hold everything fairly level. Again, you want a decent sized building surface, whether it's your kitchen table or whatever, but you want it to be fairly flat at this point because we're going to stiffen up this tail. This is where these 3mm pieces of foam come in. They're pretty soft and flexible, but it's all we're going to need to get that tail stiffened up. With it down on the surface, everything's flat. If you need to use a square or something to kind of get this pushed, left or right until it sits pretty straight, and then this piece here is just going to glue in at a 45-degree angle, and it's going to go from the trailing edge of the doubler back almost to the hinge line on the horizontal. And it will go pretty much flush with the outside edge of this fuselage here, especially up in here where you get into the aileron, so that it's not overhanging, so the aileron doesn't catch it as it deflects. And so you'll carefully put those in place. For that matter, you could probably just put a nice bead of welders along each side of this and then push it in place. Put that one on, put your welders on this piece, push it in place, and then just, as it dries, you'll be able to push it down evenly on both sides. Check this to make sure it's straight, you don't have any twists or anything in that. And if you're careful about putting that down, that'll give you a real nice stiff straight tail. You can go ahead and flip it over, and pretty much doing the same as we did on the lower part of the fuselage. We will glue the upper part of the fuselage onto the airplane. And then once that's attached, you can hinge the rudder back to the back.